Salvi's Search for the Universe. Chapter 6, Part 2. Salvi stumbled through the darkened alleys, a little glum after being thrown out of her fifth store. The evening sky glowed through pastel swirls of yellow, orange and red as the sun quietly slipped away to sleep until the next morning. The air grew chilly and the streets grew silent. The merchants had all packed up. The tradesmen had all returned to their homes. All that remained on the streets, apart from the occasional guards, were the near to-do-wells and people looking to get drunk. The latter far outnumbered the former, but not mutually exclusive. She wandered with her head down. She had only woken up hours ago, so she was not tired, nor was she particularly upset about anything. Somewhere deep down, so deep she didn't even understand it, she felt like she should be having more fun than she actually was. The human city was interesting, but after the initial shock had worn off, she couldn't help but realize that it did not match her expectations. But that didn't seem to satisfy her. There were no traps lying around, nor was there the omnipresent threat of rocks collapsing onto your head. She had every reason to be perfectly happy, but she wasn't. She stopped, crossed her arms, and wrapped the sum total of her intellect around the problem until the answer finally clicked. She was trapped in a world that seemed to revolve around money, but she had none. But not only that, she was trapped in a world that seemed to revolve around money, and she was sober. Although those rotten fruits she ate last week had a bit of a kick to them, it had been over a month since she last tasted proper alcohol. Overhead something cracked in a gentle breeze. She looked up, and her eyes suddenly shone like stars. It was as if the gods themselves had hung that sign. It depicted some aggressively garish pantaloons, but that was not at all important. What was, however, was the picture of the wooden tankard overflowing with bubbling ale. The universal language for "here there be booze." She burst through the doors, whizzing past the patrons and launching herself into the bar stool. The seat went two-legged for a moment and nearly pitched her onto the floor, but she managed to grab the tabletop and pull herself upright. The barmaid behind the counter watched the whole scene with the squint to her eye that seemed to blend confusion and concern, and said, "What am I looking at?" without saying a single word.
Salvi want alcohol!
What kind? Salvi was stunned, expressionless. There were other kinds of alcohol. Sure, there were lots of things with alcohol in them, but other kinds of alcohol? The human world certainly was interesting. Confused and slightly curious, she pointed emphatically to a nondescript man drinking from a tall, foaming stein. He looked back at her along with the rest of the tavern and wore the same confused expression as mentioned above. Spiedmont Ale? She nodded and leaned her chin over the countertop. This is what she had been waiting for. This is what made the whole journey worth it. She waited eagerly like a dog expecting a treat, but was suddenly struck by a creeping sense of impending dread. No, it couldn't be. "That's 2 coppers," the barmaid said curtly. No, this wasn't fair. Her bright expression fell into the throes of despair. She buried her head into the crook of her elbow and banged the table. Why? Why did it have to turn out like this?
Why everything costs money?
Salvi cried out and moaned and made a terrible racket. The barmaid's expression tilted away from the side of confusion and bent over in concern. "Hey, scaly girlie!" someone shouted from behind. She turned her red-rimmed eyes to see 3 rough-looking men sitting around a circular table. One was hailing her. The other 2 were looking at the one with bubbly amusement. "I'll give you something to drink if you come play with me."
Really?
Her eyes immediately brightened, and when he insisted it was serious, it was as if she had never been sad at all. The barmaid looked worried as she scampered off on little legs to their table. She was only tall enough to peer over the top. "Really, mate? A kobold?" One of the others bubbled. "Shut up! My wife ain't giving me nothing. Sides, ain't ya ever get curious what cold-blooded poon feels like?" The 2 others giggled into their cups. Salvi wasn't sure what a poon was, but she could smell alcohol on their breath and was immediately jealous. She tried to sit in one of the chairs, but it did not make a difference. The man laughed, then belched. "Can't raise a table like that? What about you sit on my lap?" The man was offering free booze, so she did. She straddled his muscular leg like the trunk of a fallen tree. She could reach the table comfortably, and she figured this is what being a human felt like. The man flagged down one of the barmaids. She bounced eagerly. The wait was agonizing, but her patience was soon rewarded when the barmaid set down a fresh, foaming tankard in front of her. She stared at it with childlike glee. It looked absolutely enormous next to her small head. She grabbed and gulped down greedy mouthfuls of the spicy ale. 2 rivulets trickled down the corners of her mouth until she slammed the thing down on the table, completely hollow. Foam painted a rim around her angled reptilian face. It wasn't as strong as she was used to, but it was the best she had ever tasted. She leaned into the man and let out a blissful sigh as the alcohol turned into a warm, golden glow in her belly. Fire and damnations, girlie. You pounded that back like it was your first drink after a year in the clink. He dangled her over his knee and leaned over her small frame. So, girlie, he grinned suggestively. You ever sleep with a human afore? Sleep with humans? She had seen plenty of humans asleep, but had never slept with a human.
Nope,
She said innocently, and most notably, soberly. The girthy man's sleazy grin quivered a bit.
looks like you're gonna need a little more than that, Samsar.
One of his companions cooed as he waved his empty tankard around. Samsa, where had she heard that before?
Fill me up too while you're at it, ya horny bastard.
He slammed his tankard down. His other companion tilted his tankard straight over his head, shook it a few times for good measure, and slammed it down as well.
Same here, mate. Heard the merchants finally paid you back. You're good for it, right?
The man grumbled and ordered the group another 4 drinks. They shared and offered him oleaginous words of praise to make up for what was little more than highway robbery, but he was vain enough to take it with pride.
You see all those guards on the street? What got their nads in a twist? Bloody damn hard to dip for coin purses with all that noise around. Them gates close all day too. Lord Farry died or some shit. Betcha good money, that's it. And Harvey, how many times have I told you to cut that shit out? Come to one of my wrestle games and I'll show you how to really fleece a sucker. Bet, eh?
Samsa fished out a silver coin and flipped it.
Silver on some bloody royal bastard coming in from Panes, and they trying to make the streets real clean for 'em.
He seemed to laugh at the idea.
Hell, I'll match that. My silver's on Mad Devon fucking up, and calling the whole damn city down on his arse. The hell was he smuggling in? Bombs?
None of this made any sense to Salvi, so she just swayed side to side on her hairy perch and tapped an alien offbeat tune on the tabletop. Ever since she talked with that minstrel, she couldn't get it out of her head. Miraculously, the alcohol arrived. She downed the next cup in much the same manner as the first, and sat through their banal chatter until the 3rd and 4th round had come and went. Samsa rubbed her up and down the side and kept asking her weird questions. But whenever she answered them, he made a face and brought her more alcohol, so she liked the questions. His 2 friends were under the table by the 4th round, and Samsa himself started to sway after the 6th. He kept grabbing at various parts of her body, and it tickled. It was annoying, but she remembered that he had asked her to play with him in return for alcohol, so she did her best to avoid his grabbing hands and play along with his weird, lap-based game of catch. He started to get angry for some reason. He stopped and caught her between both arms and squeezed her close to his chest.
What did I say? You and I go somewhere more private?
He slurred.
No more booze?
Salvi tilted her head up and looked at his upside-down face.
No.
No thanks. Salvi, stay here.
She tried to squirm free and suddenly felt the arms tighten around her.
I don't think you understand what's going on there, girlie. I'm trying to be cordial about it, but I'm done of playing games with you.
He kept squeezing tighter and tighter. It was starting to hurt. She would have scratched him, but her arms were pinned to her side. She tried to yelp, but his muscular hands squeezed her mouth and nose shut.
We're gonna have some fun.
He started to stand, carrying her with him, when someone suddenly clasped his shoulder and stopped him from behind. "What in the world are you doing to that poor creature?" the voice asked.
None of your business.
He spun drunkenly and met the guard dead in the eyes. It was just not one behind him, but 3. The off-duty guards were out of armor, but the patterns on their clothing were unmistakable. "You're looking a bit tired of your skull, friend. Now, come on, put the creature down and go home." The man was young and ruggedly handsome in a way, but not enough to turn heads.
I some further guards,
he babbled, dropped Salvi to the floor and swung his fist the size of a glazed ham at the guard, who stepped aside and slugged the drunken man in the cheek with bone-rattling impact. Samsa wobbled and swayed. His eyes fluttered, rolled back into his head, and his whole body collapsed like a felled tree. The floorboards creaked under the weight of the unconscious man.
"Damnations, Drow!"
One of the guards whistled at him. "Mind taking care of him for me?" he asked, and the two shrugged. They took the man by both shoulders and dragged him out of the tavern and into the street. Brown walked with tender, bow-legged steps to a nearby table and sank into a world of relief as he sat down. It didn't take long for his friends to take care of business. They walked in, surveyed the prying eyes, and sat down. Salvi hugged the leg of the table, spying on the party from a distance. "Don't look so thrilled to see us." Brown gave a subtle gesture to rest the tavern's patrons. At the same time he hailed down one of the barmaids. Half of the tavern was either staring at them from over their cups with sly, sharp eyes, or trying to avoid eye contact entirely. That barmaid rolled her eyes at me. Ain't it obvious? We're scaring away half the customers. The other guard took his fingers behind his head and leaned back breezily. He looked to be in his late 30s and was already starting to grey. What kind of seedy dump did you bring me to, Gawain? The best kind. Food's good, lovely atmosphere. What more do you want? Not getting shanked on the way out of here. Braum grumbled, but with more than a little amusement. Did we really need to wear our uniforms for this? It's more fun this way. Besides, if you're about to get shanked, just use Carlos as a shield. If he gets shanked by the end of tonight, I'll consider this bend a success. He laughed, digging his elbow into the third guard's side. Hey, bloody bastard, just see that I don't shank ya first. He jabbed back. Their raucous laughter only got louder as their food and drinks arrived. Salvi's mouth watered as she stared at the glistering skin of the roast pig, the oil still sizzling and popping. By the time the smell had wafted over, she was already walking towards it. She climbed atop the chair and stood. She could reach the table perfectly this way. Gawain and Carlos stared at her with such profound expressions of disappointment and disgust. She would have withered away had she been observant enough to read that much into their faces. Braum already looked a bit in his cups after only one drink.
Salvi won't say thanks.
The two exchanged annoyed glances and got out of their seats, about to switch seats and take their drinks and food with them, in hopes that even someone as stupid as her would pick up on the hint. But Braum stayed put. Yo, welcome. He hiccuped. It had already taken his brain that long to process it. Think nothing of it. Think nothing of it. He let out a bubbly laugh. Pretty wake to the sauce, ain't ya? Carlos slid up to Braum and prepared to drag him away to their new seat. Come on, let's get some better seats. What's wrong with kobolds anyway? He demanded vehemently to no one in particular, and suddenly lifted Salvi up from under both her armpits like a cat. Don't you think they're kind of cute? Salvi blinked, face to face with Gawain. He squinted, eyed her dubiously, then switched his gaze to Braum. What part? They got big eyes, big heads. They look like babies, don't you think? Braum moved her up and down. Gawain's dubious squint came back, and was finished off with a disbelieving smirk. Ain't so cute when a pack of them ambush you by the side of the road. Carlos poked at a suspended kobold, but she batted his finger away and crossed her arms petulantly.
Salvi never do that.
Sure. It's just your friends that do that, eh?
Humans kill each other all the time. Why is it so strange when kobolds do it?
The both of them stared at him incredulously, but his insane argument made some kind of strange, drunken sense. They sat down, but it was less that they had seen the light, and more that it was obvious Braum wasn't going anywhere.
I think I'm going to need to be at least as drunk as you for this,
Gawain said, bitterly amused, and ordered another round. Braum sat Salvi down on top of the table.
Hey, Gawain, are you?
Gavin?
Salvi interrupted.
Gawain,
he mouthed deliberately.
Gawain.
Gavin!
He rolled his eyes.
These things ain't too bright, are they?
Did he just call her stupid?
Sound like Soldier Gavin.
What? Is that someone you know?
Carlos leaned in and seemed to be warming up to the situation, if only for the adventurousness of it all. Gawain snatched his whiskey chin.
Isn't that someone at the main gate named Gavin? The one with a face like this?
He contorted his face, but it could not make it justice.
Yes, yes.
Salvi nodded energetically, reached into her pocket, and held up the small, carved figure of a soldier. Gawain leaned in, squinted at it, and exploded into laughter.
It looks exactly like him.
He crackled and roared until he was hacking phlegm and struggled to breathe. Several long wheezes came out before he finally recovered.
Hell, I'm buying you a drink for that one.
He wiped tears from his eyes and waved his arm for the barmaid. Braum handed her some roast pig, and she was in heaven.
Salvi, human now!
She boasted atop Braum's shoulders to raucous laughter and drunken cheers, as she held out her arms as if catching the non-existent breeze from the vertiginous height. Gawain held a copper coin under Salvi's nose. She crossed her arms, focused intently. He rolled it along his knuckles with some flair, and smirked before squeezing his hand shut. He opened it again, and the coin was gone. She grabbed his hand, looked all around, but she couldn't find it. He snapped his fingers and opened his hand again. Salvi gasped. The other two laughed heartily. The coin was back.
Gavin is magician.
That's right. You can call me Gavin the Great.
He poured the remains of his tankard into his mouth and screamed.
More! We drink, and we drink some more.
They all sang and swung their drinks from side to side. Drunk enough to forget their distaste for the city god, the rest of the tavern joined in as well. Salvi tried to swing hers, but the liquid's weight kept dragging her along.
And Garl fell like this.
Salvi stepped, swung her legs forward and slipped backwards, slamming against the table. The bony remains of the pig leapt a foot into the air on impact, and all the emptied tankards fell over. Braum laughed, hiccuped, and laughed some more.
"Come on, dirty bloody milksop!"
Carlos shouted in the meanwhile, stretching down his shirt to reveal his bare chest, bristling black hair. Gawain seized a handful and ripped it clean off. Carlos howled in pain, downed the entire tankard and slammed it on top the table, howling in victory as if he had achieved something. A passing barmaid shook her head and made a silent prayer for the sake of the male sex.
"He's not drunk enough,"
Carlos cried.
"Give him some more."
Salvi trotted atop the table and hoisted the pitcher over her shoulder, fighting the weight of the liquid as much as the ale already in her belly. She tipped the pitcher and poured a waterfall of ale into Gawain's waiting mouth. He gaggled and gurgled and managed to get at least half of it down as Carlos clapped his hands, offbeat and often missing his other more than he hit. Braum snorted loudly in a puddle of his own drool.